All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Douglas Ferguson, and I'm going to be presenting today on building a public wireless network or a private wireless network with pfSense. And pfSense is an open source software package based on the FreeBSD, and it's basically a router, but it has some features in it for doing public access systems. And as I've subtitled this, because of all the different things I had to go through to do this, I've subtitled it Routers and VLANs and VMs, oh my. So let me just start with why I did this project. I needed to provide, excuse me, there was a request to have wireless internet access for the public and the office in my church. And we also needed to have printer access to quote-unquote office guests. So people who were maybe a visiting pastor or somebody who's taking a class or something, they needed printer access. And we also wanted to provide VPN access to the office network for people from remote locations. So I looked around and I looked at a lot of different products. The number one thing was budget for a church. I don't have $15,000 to lay out for a full Cisco or a VIA networking system, and we don't have staff. Me. I'm a volunteer, don't have time to go having the whole thing configured and everything. So the basic network infrastructure in our environment is we have a cable connection from Cablevision Optimum, and we have multiple IP addresses. And these multiple IP addresses come through an internet gateway, which is a Cisco 800 router, which is attached to the cable modem. So this was our basic office network. It connected from the internet gateway into a Linksys RV082 router, which then provided access to the office network. So what we did was, the first part was to get public wireless access. So we hung the wireless infrastructure off of another IP from the internet gateway. So public wireless access is handled through a captive portal, and any of you who used the internet here today have used a captive portal. Here it's using a system where you have to actually put in a login and a password, and we could have done that, but we weren't interested in just, restricting access or managing users and passwords and such. So basically what we have is the user attaches to the network, and the captive portal system looks at the MAC address of the person's system and says, okay, do I know who this person is? Yes, they're allowed to have access. So it's seen them before, they've been authenticated or verified or whatever. If not, they're routed to the usage term acceptance page. And the usage term acceptance page is basically just a bunch of legalese that says, we're not responsible for anything that happens to your computer while you're using the network. The network is filtered, the network is monitored, but if your kids run into some sort of bad stuff, it's not our fault. You need to monitor your children, you need to have antivirus software, all that good stuff. So then, once the person has accepted the network, the usage term acceptance, then their MAC address is added to the system, and it won't be presented with that access page again. So basically, here's the public Wi-Fi access system. There's a public wireless network, which is attached to the pfSense router, which is then routed through the second public IP address to the internet gateway to the internet. And we do use some filtering. We use OpenDNS as a DNS provider, and that offers us some filtering capabilities so we can restrict adult content, gambling, things like that. Although OpenDNS is kind of interesting because one of our pastors was complaining because he couldn't get to Sports Illustrated. So for some reason, OpenDNS marked Sports Illustrated as adult content, I guess for the swimsuit issue. But. So then we also had to provide wireless access for the people using the office. And I'm not dealing with IT workers here. I'm dealing with pastors, I'm dealing with secretaries, or excuse me, administrative assistants, you know, just general things like that. And most offices, what they'll do is you attach the VPN, you attach to the wireless network, and then you VPN into the office network. That was a little too complicated for people. So what we did was we set up a separate SSID on the wireless access points, which use WPA2 security and a strong password. So basically the wireless network, the wireless access points, became the gatekeepers. Alternatively, we could have had pfSense provide access via a login or an MAC address restriction, but again, we felt that that added too much overhead to trying to maintain the system. So the office network, what happens here is somebody comes into the office wireless, they're given an IP address on as 192.168.124 subnet, and then that's routed back to the office network, which is another set of IP addresses, or it can directly go out through the internet. Feel free to stop me if anybody has any questions. Okay? It'll get a little more complicated in a minute. So, you said, okay, you just showed me two wireless networks. Do you have two sets of wireless access points for those networks? Do you have two sets of wiring for those networks? No. The solution here is the wireless access point which we chose to use actually has the capability to do multiple SSIDs. The SSID is that little name that comes up when you attach to a wireless network, like if you have one that says home or default or Linksys. I hope nobody uses Linksys, but so each SSID has its own. Okay, so we didn't want to have multiple wireless access points because we didn't want to have to worry about cost, and we didn't want to have to worry about interference. Okay, so because I could have multiple 2.4 gigahertz, if I have two access points sitting next to one another, they got to fight for frequencies and such. So one is better. So like I said, we use SSIDs for each. So the wireless access points we chose had the ability to do four SSIDs. And each one has their own security and visibility settings. So if somebody comes into our building, if they don't know it's there, they don't see the office wireless network. It's invisible. It's not broadcasting. And in order to get onto the office wireless network, you have to have the WAC2 key, which when we set up anybody's new machine, we put that key in there. So basically what happens is the traffic for each SSID goes over a separate virtual LAN or VLAN. Is everybody familiar with VLAN? Anybody have questions? If I'm going over people's head, please stop me. A VLAN is basically a separate network that's happening at the Ethernet or layer 2 level. Okay, so the traffic on the default VLAN does not, if your machine is connected to the default VLAN, you don't see the traffic on VLAN 2. Okay?
So when you say that the SSID, so if you say search for networks in this neighborhood, you don't even see that SSID as
unless you knew what its name was.
Unless you knew what its name
Right.
was, and you said go. So this is the option where it says, "Oh, pick another network."
Right.
When it's not in the
Correct.
system.
Correct. And that's the way it is in most offices. The office network is typically not visible. You may never have to input it because probably your IT people set it up, so they have some before they install the system. So each traffic for each VLAN rides on its own, or traffic for each SSID rides on its own VLAN. So that's how the next screen, that's how the traffic from the different wireless networks can ride on the same network. And then within, and I'll show this when I show the software, within pfSense, I'm able to tell it, okay, I want this to be on VLAN 2, I want this interface to use VLAN 1. Okay? So the other thing we did here was, instead of having a pfSense server for each, because these are two separate two separate operating system installs. So we've got, instead of having a separate, I could have had a separate physical machine for each one. So what I opted to do instead was I opted to do a virtual infrastructure. So I'm running VMware ESXi 3.5 because I'm using 32-bit OS. The basic ESXi is free. It's basically the hypervisor. So I'm operating these as virtual machines. I had a single 2U server running ESXi 3.51 or i.5i, and it also offers me remote access capability. If I have to reboot one of these, I just go into my VMware control panel, and I can reboot the operating system. So each one has 3 physical network. So the server itself has 3 physical Ethernet interfaces: the internet, the wireless network where the wireless infrastructure is, and also another room which is a public classroom which is tied into that, and the office LAN.
So again, here now, you couldn't run 2 instances of pfSense on the same.
I could run 2 instances. I could run an instance of pfSense working with different networks, but the problem with pfSense is the version I'm using. If you turn the captive portal on, it turns it on for all the interfaces, and I didn't want the captive portal being used for the office network.
Okay, not sure what you're saying, but
The captive portal is the thing that asks somebody to agree.
Right.
And I'll show you this on pfSense when I go into it. If I turn the captive portal on, it turns it on for all the interfaces. And I didn't want the captive portal on at all for the
So you really
for the
need
office.
to have 2 separate.
Yeah, and I wanted to also balance the load a little bit. So
And VMware helps with that?
VMware lets me have 2 separate servers, basically 2 separate servers running on the same server.
Well, two separate
separate,
operating systems
yes.
running on the same. And how does it?
Well, I mean, it balances it. In other words, I'm not having all the network traffic going through one process. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've got network traffic going through the office router, and I've got network traffic going through the public router. So this is the final chart here. And so as you can see, we've got the internet over in the lower right-hand corner. That comes into the gateway router, which is provided by the cable company that gives us our multiple public IP addresses, and that connects directly to the wide area network connection for the guest router and the public, or the office guest router and the public router, and then the second network interface on the blue thing is the whole ESXi server. The second network interface there connects to the office LAN. So that allows us to route traffic into the office LAN over the office wireless. And then the wireless network is sitting there off of the other network interface. And that's the actual physical wireless connectivity. And one port which goes out to a public classroom. Yeah.
Is the top link from wireless LAN to public router, that's VLAN 1, which is not 1?
There's no, yeah, VLAN 1 is the default VLAN. So anything that's connected up that isn't specifically declared a VLAN goes on to VLAN 1, which is the default VLAN. So for the wireless infrastructure, in order to avoid having to run power cables and so forth, I used power over Ethernet, and after searching around, we decided we wanted to stick with one common wireless router instead of multiple ones. The one I decided on was the D-Link DAP 2553. I have 7 of those, some of which I was able to purchase on eBay for $60. Since then, they've become harder to find. We actually had to buy 4 of them at retail. They've become harder to find. Now I would probably change, if I were building it today, I would probably change my mind on that and get the DAP 2555 because it has some better configuration capabilities, but I'm not going to change my system after I built it. What I did was, one of the biggest purchases I had to make was a 3-COM power over Ethernet switch to provide the power over Ethernet. Again, eBay's a great place for these things. I spent $90. It works. So,
So your Firewall is Ethernet?
yes.
What is actually managing the power?
Well, it sends your device the device itself is designed to get power over the Ethernet cable. It's a standard in the industry. It's about 5 volts, so it's low voltage, and the switch provides the power over the regular Ethernet cable, and the device takes it from there. So it's been pretty useful because, one, I don't have to run power cables all over the place. I can just take an access point and stick it in the ceiling and not have to, as long as I got an Ethernet connection, I don't have to run a power cable or anything like that, which is usually the biggest pain in some of these things. The other thing I had to do, the other thing's nice is if and I've had this happen, a wireless access point got hung for some reason, I'm able to reboot the wireless access point even if I can't get to its, web page, because I can just go to the switch and tell the switch power it off and then power it back on again. So I can pretty much administer this whole thing from my iPad.
And what's the boot up time?
For an access point,
Yeah.
same as you want at home. Just comes on a minute or so. So, how does this whole thing perform? Well, we have multiple groups of people who use the church. We have people who come in for meetings, we have people who come in for services, we have all sorts of things. Our busiest day of the week is Tuesday, and I've had to up this year. We have a homeschool group that uses the facility on Tuesday, and there's about 135 families who come in. I have it tracking the system right now. I'm maxing out my IP pool for my DHCP, which I need to do some redesign, but I've got about 135 users on here. And average Tuesday handles 10 gigabytes of traffic from 8 a.m. until about 5 p.m. 10 gigabytes. Runs around 3 to 5 megabits per second all day. I can show you the chart, you can see that. The stress test for my system was really about 2 months after I finished installing it. We had Superstorm Sandy come through. Our church was one of the only places around that had power. We had about 50, any given day, early on, we had about probably 50 to 100 people in the church. Some people were working remotely. They work at home, so they came to the church and they were working from there. In those 12 days, we handled 60 gigabytes a day in 12 days. I only had one problem with the person. And the problem was that their company had their laptop locked down so much that they couldn't go to a website unless they were on the company's network. So they couldn't get to the page to approve them. So I went into the system, put their MAC address in the approved page, and they went on and worked without any issue. So, matter of fact, I worked from the church because I had no power for 12 days. So that's the end of that, and right now I'm going to switch over to demonstrating the system. So pfSense comes up with a web interface when you go into it. And I'll log in. So this is the first page that you'll see. You can see right here, this has been up for 21 days. 21 days, 5 hours. And the main reason why it went down was because we had an electrical line fail in the server room and somebody had to rewire it. So what you do when you start up pfSense is you come in and you assign your network interfaces. So I've got an assigned for the WAN, which is the wide area network, not wireless area network. And so this is just like your router at home, your Linksys router, something like that. We've got a WAN, and that's EM0, and we've got the LAN, which is EM1. And then for my services up here, I've got my captive portal. And you can see right here, the captive portal is enabled on the LAN interface. And you can see here, these are all the addresses that have been added to the system. Since these are people who logged into the system since like forever, so it's pretty big.
So after you log on to the
After you accept the terms for the first time, your MAC address gets added to here, and you're not gonna get asked again.
Automatic.
Yeah, so you come in with, if you bought a new laptop and you came in again, you'd be prompted again, yeah. So,
So now, does pfSense work on a wireless network that's not public?
yes, that's the other one. There's another one I use for the office.
Okay, so it works as well?
Yes.
Alright.
And what it's doing there is it's doing a little more complicated routing, because it's actually acting like more like a regular router, in that it says, okay, if I want to send traffic to the office network, which is 192.168.121, I need to go through this interface,
Oh,
okay? The other thing I did on here is we wanted to give people the ability to print from their iPhones or their iPads, which is AirPrint, and we have about about 4 or 5 printers in the office. None of them are AirPrint enabled. So what I did was I set up another virtual machine running Ubuntu, which is running the wireless, which is running AirPrint. So when you go on to, so people in the office, don't offer that to the public people. I only offer this to the office people or the office guests. So they can go in there, they see the printers, and they can print right from their iPhone or their iPad or their Android directly to the printer.
so the Ubuntu supports the air.
The Ubuntu is providing the AirPrint. I did the same thing at home. I took my wife's old netbook, put Ubuntu on it, and set it up as an AirPrint server.
Okay.
So,
Does that work for any other Linux system?
yeah, a lot of them have it. It's just I chose Ubuntu because it was the easiest thing to set up. I mean, it's out there. There's an AirPrint server for a lot of them. So this is the one for the office network. And you'll see here my interfaces. I've got a bunch more interfaces. Okay. So you'll see here the office, so the LAN here is EM1. The VLAN, the office network, the office wireless is VLAN 2 on EM1. Okay? The guest network, which is for people who aren't, they don't need access to our NT file server or anything, they just need access to our printers. They're on VLAN 3. So here I can declare that. And then the EM2 is the connection to the actual physical office LAN. So then if you come over here to the routing, this thing's working pretty well actually. You can see right here, if I want people, if they're going out to the internet, that's the WAN gateway, they're going through the regular Ethernet gateway, the regular gateway we have to the internet. If they need to get to the office LAN, that goes through here, and then this is the other one that goes through right here. Okay? So those are the gateways, and then these are the routes. So what we say is if you need to go to 192.168.1.0 network, or the 1.x network, that goes through the office LAN gateway. If you need to get to the 192.168.121/24 network, that also goes through the office LAN gateway. The reason why there's a 192.6.1 subnet is because when they originally set up the network, they set it up with 192.168.1, and I'm trying to get rid of that because it conflicts when people try to do the VPN. Because I also have over here the VPN gateway. I have a PPTP VPN gateway, and people will get a 124 address when they come through, and then they get logged into the network servers and so forth. But if I go back over to my, I can look at my status right here, and at any point in time, I can see my DHCP leases. And if I just do a sort right here, so I don't have a lot of people online right now. It is a Saturday afternoon. So but you can see, if I also go in here, I can look at my RRD graphs. And this is the screen's a little small. This is the traffic graph. So I have a traffic graph here over 8 hours on 1 minute averages. And if I go here, I have traffic over a day. And you can see Friday night we have some activities in the church, so it goes, we get some traffic there. But looking at the week, you can see my Tuesdays, and my Tuesdays have a lot of traffic. You can see that the average is about 3.5 to 5 meg at a time. And then if you look over time, you can see a monthly track, and then 3 months, and then finally there's a 1 year average. And you can see where in the summer we don't have our homeschool group there, and the traffic kind of flattens out. And then here's our 4-year moving average. I put it into place in around July to August of 2012, but you can see my October 2012 spike there for Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy. But our homeschool group has been using a lot more data right now. I'm having some performance issues, and I think it's due to I need to increase the number of available IP addresses on the DHCP server. So I'm going to need to do some re-architecting on the network. So, any questions on this? Feel free to ask.
It's like an immense church, to have all these people there using the internet at once. And I'm guessing that a large percentage of the people who are at the church aren't using the internet when they're there. Am I missing something?
These numbers aren't that high, okay? The numbers. So if you look at our numbers for a Sunday, okay, the Sunday is very low.
Okay.
Okay. Tuesday is our biggest day. Like I said, we have a homeschool group that uses our church.
And what devices are they bringing?
Phones, laptops, tablets. You got to figure there's parents there who some parents who are working, who work from home, who bring their kids to it's a music and art program that runs there.
Right.
So they bring their kids in for a class and they work remotely for a couple hours. You've got kids who've got their phone and they're sitting there streaming Pandora. You've got people some of the kids who they're homeschooled, and they come there and they do 2 or 3 classes during the day, but in between classes, they're in a classroom somewhere running a video as part of their homeschooling. So, it's not our average. I have numbers on the number of people using, and an average day we max out at maybe 20 or 30 people. But some people, what happens is they've used their phone and connected to the network once. So whenever they come into the church and they've got their phone with them,
Yeah.
it connects to the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
So it's going to do all the normal stuff that your phone is doing, getting email, checking out Facebook, things like that. So that's part of the situation that occurs. But actual real usage, a lot of it happens on Tuesdays. And there's other people, like Friday nights we have a group in the church. Thursdays we have another homeschooling group that comes in that does a couple classes. We have teachers who do Sunday school classes and so forth, and they're using material off the internet, like videos and things, and they're pulling stuff off the Wi-Fi. So, yeah.
So don't you have to have a restriction maybe on the data? I mean, what if one day
Yes.
everybody's wants to watch
Netflix.
Netflix?
Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to mention that.
Well, I just know my daughter's going to go there and watch Netflix all
Well,
2
no,
hours.
I have. Thank you for bringing that up. sorry, I forgot to mention, in my captive portal setup, you will see down here, there is a bandwidth restriction. So individual bandwidths are limited to 1024, 1 meg down, and 128K up. So
Now, your ISP provider,
our ISP, we have what's called the Ultra 50 from Optimum, and we run about 65 to 70 megabit down and about 25 megabit up. So we're nowhere near saturating our link. Nowhere near. We have 5 IP addresses, so we're good.
that's the basic package, you know?
No, it's a step up. Yeah, because we originally got the static IPs because we were doing a link with another facility we were running, so we were running a VPN between the village, and we needed a static IP for that. But it's their Ultra 50, and it's supposed to be 50 megabit down, 25 up, but we get about 65 to 70 down and 50 up, or 25 up. We've never really.
That's for you manipulating your own.
No, that's them. That's what they give us.
That's what they do.
That's what we purchase from them. But this is, I've restricted users to a meg down, which is reasonable for people to do what they need to do. Like I said, Tuesday is the busiest day, and we push about 10 meg that day. But if you come over and look at the RRD graph, you can see right down there. Okay, so today it may look like a lot of data is going through, but we pushed 63 megabytes today, and over the past day, we pushed 1.13 gig, and during the week we pushed about 16 gig. Last night was probably a busy night because the high school boys had a non-sleepover at the church, so I think they were probably doing some stuff. So. But
What is the learning curve to use pfSense?
to set it up basically, it's not any harder than your regular router at home. But if you're going to start getting into more advanced things, like with the office router, with the routing I have and the masking and the firewall and everything, that's a little more complicated. But there's a ton of documentation online. There's some people who use this. There's some stuff. I know Revision 3 did. Bless you. I know Revision 3 did a how-to on it. But if you go online, there's a lot of information on how to do it. But in order to do some of the more advanced stuff like I did with the routing, you really need to understand how IP routing works. So, but
The information there is there if you wanted to take it to the next.
right. Well, the thing is that a lot of it is stuff that you would need to understand IP routing and so forth. But to do the basic stuff, it's pretty straightforward.
Because this is actually software used to actually construct your routing of.
Right. Well, your Linksys box or your D-Link box or whatever you have at home is the same thing.
Right.
Matter of fact, there is software you can load onto Linksys and other routers, which is open source, which does a lot of this same stuff.
Okay.
It's called the Tomato firmware, or you might hear DDWRT.
I heard that.
Yeah, I did a presentation on that about 5 years ago. But this runs on a regular box, and there's people who sell boxes to do this. But because when you're a corporation and you go out and buy, when you buy a heavy-duty Cisco router, you're buying a computer that has software on it. You license the software.
Can you talk a bit about firewall and security features?
Sure.
In case you don't know Cisco.
So the firewall. So first of all, like I said, my internet filtering takes place at OpenDNS. OpenDNS is a company that provides DNS services. But what I've done is I set up an account with them, and I've set up restrictions. Like, for example, I can't go to playboy.com from this network. But as far as the firewall, you have your rules. And you'll see a couple rules I put in here. This rule right here is to allow access to the SNMP from another network, which is my network at home because I do monitoring of the system from my home network. There's other things so there's schedules you can put in. I don't have any set up, but you can have a schedule to say, okay, shut off access after 10 p.m. I can have traffic shaping, which I haven't tried to get into yet. Other services, I've got my DHCP server, and that's how I give out the addresses. Enable on the LAN, not the WAN.
So if I were interested in using this, but also having something like an IDX running at the same time, I wouldn't be able to do it from within pfSense and have a separate box, probably.
An IDF,
Like snort, intrusion detection.
oh, actually, you can get, this is another great thing. You can get packages. And I only have cron and open VMware tools installed. But if you go in here to your packages, you've got everything, and I do believe Snort is in here. Because you've got Radius if you want to use Radius for authentication. There's an antivirus. Yeah, it's got Squid. You really want to mess with people, there's things you can do in Squid, like turn their pages upside down.
Really, that's nice.
So you got a BGP gateway, OSPF, OpenVPN. So trying to find, I know Snort is probably under the S. Yeah, there's Snort right there. Spam services. I don't run a lot of these things because I don't have a lot of horsepower, and I don't understand how to administrate them, and I don't feel like learning right now. So I've got enough trouble trying to get my VMware certification right now. So the other thing is, these act as the pfSense server acts as a network time server for all of my access points, so they all stay within.
What type of, like, how often do you do an update, and has it been, is it broken and been doing any updates?
I haven't updated this in a while. I just, every once in a while, if I see there's a security update on pfSense, but for the most part, it's built on FreeBSD, which is a pretty rock solid platform to begin with. So I'm probably bad. I should probably be checking it more often, but I don't go messing with it because it works.
Right.
It's one of those things. It's a pretty rock solid product. It's been around for a while. So
So you have diagnostic software as well?
yeah, there's diagnostics. Any of the diagnostics you want to look at. And the diagnostics you can look at, like I said, we can come in here. You can do a packet capture if you want to just check out people. You can see what the routes are. You can see what the state summary are. Like if you have a user who's saying, "Well, I can't get, it's not working for me," you can come in here and you can see the states for their IP address and see exactly what's going on. Your diagnostics, you have your you have your tables, you have your trace route diagnostics, you also have status. That's also a little bit of system logs. The system logs are actually in the status. You can see this was this last Tuesday. I had a bunch of people who couldn't get, I was running out of IP addresses. You can look at your queues, which I don't have any set up. So all your services, whether they're running or not, you can monitor it via SNMP, which I'm doing remotely. The captive portal, cron jobs. So I mean, It's pretty good amount of software, and a lot of people have done a lot of development on it. Any more questions?
Notice it's running on a Xeon processor. You kind of need a network or a server quality platform for this.
Oh, what?
The server,
It says it's actually, yeah, it says it's running on a Xeon, but it's actually running on a virtual machine, which is running on a Xeon. I have a dual 2 gigahertz Xeon server, and it's running ESX, I don't know if you heard at the beginning, it's running VMs on ESXi,
yeah.
and there's 2 VMs running on there. So, and they're,
So it doesn't need to be server grade.
no, it really depends on what amount of traffic you're trying to push through. I've never seen, you can actually look at, on the status, you can actually look at on the RRD graphs, you can look at the system information. It defaults to traffic because that's usually what I'm most interested in. But you can see right here, my processor utilization is pretty low.
I run something kind of similar, it's called ClearOS at home, and I've got a lot of stuff, and I just got it running on like I'm gonna go with a 6-7-year-old HP DC 7100. It's just a premium 4. Like, you'd be surprised what, I mean, if you think about like the little Linksys routers that you get from
Right.
the store, like, those are really minimal hardware. I mean, it's more dedicated for that function, but it's optimized. But I mean, anything for anything that's reasonable, and just like you said, look at your graphs, and if you're
Yeah.
maxing anything out, then you can swap it out.
Yeah, I think that the big thing is, from what I've read from people who've done large deployments, I'm talking like thousands of users, is memory, because you start to eat up a lot of memory with your state tables. But what really starts eating up the system resources is when you do things like run Snort or run Squid or anything like that. That's really going to start eating your system resources. So, because basically all it's doing is grabbing a packet from one network interface and sending it to another. And for the most part in BSD, that stuff's been optimized
Yeah.
to no end.
I think where you start probably running into the most performance is when you start putting on more of the plugins, and if you have a bunch of VPN users or something, anything that's going to create more load, like you said, BSD is optimized.
Yeah, if you're doing VPN and you start getting in encryption, that's going to start causing problems. Not problems, but it's going to start causing more load. The highest CPU load and memory load I see is when it boots up. Any other questions?
Have you seen a total crash?
I had a problem a couple of weeks ago, but it didn't have to do with it didn't have to do with pfSense. It had to do with the hardware kept resetting itself, and I swapped out the hardware. I swapped out the machine, and it was okay. And then that's when we found out we had a bad neutral line coming into the room, and that was probably causing the resets. So the problems I've seen were more environmentally related than hardware related. Like I said, it's been running for 14 days, over 14 days now, and the only reason it went down last time was because it had reset the power in the room. Any more questions?
I guess there's an SSH on it as well.
It has SSH enabled. By default, it's not enabled. You have to go in and enable it. But basically, when you go into SSH, you get a menu prompt, and then you drop in your shell if you want to. But for the most part, the only last time I went to SSH was I have a cron job that runs that does an arc-a to show me how many clients are on the network. And that's the only reason I go on SSH is to look at that file. It just works. It took a while to get it tweaked, to get it working right, but the biggest annoyance I had was last year, I was still trying to get the AirPrint to work right. And because the AirPrint printers were showing up on the public network as well as the office network. And the reason why they were doing that, I found out, was because I was configuring the VLAN within Ubuntu itself. And apparently the AirPrint stuff, the Bonjour protocol wasn't behaving, and it was sending it out over all the VLANs. So what I had to do was I had to go into VMware and configure the port group to use a VLAN. And then once I did that, it was basically like telling the switch, this network connected to VLAN. And so then it was a problem with Ubuntu not handling VLAN correctly. So.
Did you do any research for choosing pfSense over a different product, or?
Not really. I had heard about it, and a lot of people liked it, and it seemed to do everything I wanted to do. And I just didn't see any sense of doing it. I mean, I tried doing it with OpenWRT, DDWRT, and just couldn't do all the things I wanted to do. So. Anything else?
You have the paid version?
What's that?
You have the paid version?
If you go to the pfSense website, there is a paid, they do offer consulting, and that's their paid version, basically.
I want to pay for something. It's free. It's worth it.
Well, some companies want somebody to come in and do a full deployment and everything, and that's what you're paying for. And as with any software product, that's where you make your money, is in the consulting, setting it up. So. And if you get good with this, there's no reason why you can't make money setting it up either. There's no restrictions on that. I have a friend who does that. So. Anybody else? Questions? Okay. Thank you very much.